Hi folks, sitting here in my jammies on a snowy day, giving you guys an introduction to the materials. This week we're going to continue our discussion of how to interpret popular culture texts, and we're going to do this by looking more closely at how genre formulas work. As we discussed last week, genres serve a couple of different purposes. From an industrial standpoint, genres provide a stable set of expectations for production, so it make it quicker and easier to make a new film because you already have a set of actors, a set of costumes, a set of sets, right? You know what the budget is likely to be. You have production personnel are familiar with the genre and know how to crank it out pretty quickly, right? So because they're conventional, it makes it really easy to create new text. It also has a built-in audience. It's what we call a pre-sold commodity. Audiences know the genre and they come with expectations, and so you have a kind of built-in audience whenever you use genre formulas to make a new text. Because people who like horror movies will go to almost every horror movie. People who like westerns will go to almost every western, etc., etc. Right? Which bleeds into the last industrial function of genre, which is to help differentiate and promote products in the crowded marketplace. And from an audience perspective, this is also useful, of course. We use genres to determine things that we might be interested in when we go to the movie theater, or when we turn on the television set, or if we listen to music, or we're buying a new video game. Right? We tend to make choices based on things that we've liked in the past. This is a kind of generic categorization, and this is useful to us. They're also, of course, genres reassuring to us. We know what we're getting. They're familiar. We can marvel at the way in which creative directors, producers, etc. use the conventions in new ways, right? So one of the things about genre is that there's a tension between convention and invention, right? Conventions are those set formulas. Invention is what you can do within that framework, right? Can you create something new out of things that are old and familiar? Right? So they serve a variety of functions. Not every popular culture phenomenon fits into a genre category, but many of them do, and there's an economic rationale for that, which we're going to talk about more next week. Okay. One of the things we want to talk about today that we didn't talk about last week is how unstable generic categories can be. They are not set in stone, and they do not stay the same for all time, right? So what we think of as a Western today is not really something that would have been recognizable to fans of the Western genre in the 1950s, and that's because times have changed. The genre had to change to keep up with the times. Right? Genres are categories that are socially constructed. We make them and use them. We people make them and use them, and the ways that we use them can alter the formulas a little bit. Right? And of course, we add new categories all the time, right? So if you go to Netflix, for example, you'll notice dozens of genres. If we run a little search here for Netflix and genre categories. We come up with literally hundreds of different genres and subgenres here. We could go on and on and on and on and on. According to this article in The Atlantic, Netflix has created over 76,000 micro-genres to help us personalize our tastes and define what new products we might like out of all of the many hundreds of thousands of things Netflix has to offer us. So one of the ways that we cope with all of this abundance is to categorize. But of course, categorization is also just fundamental to our thinking processes. When we encounter new things, the first thing we try to do with them is fit them into a container of things that we're already familiar with. Right? This is part of the learning process. We take unfamiliar things and we try to make them familiar. We try to fit them into the categories that we already have. And if they don't fit into those categories, we're always a little bit upset about that. And so sometimes we'll try to wrench them into those categories. But it doesn't always work. But genres are really just a manifestation of this really basic intellectual activity of categorization. Okay? So we want to think about that as we're reading through the materials for this week. So I would recommend you start with Barry Grant's essay about genres and some of the conventions, what those are, the iconography, what those things are, right? And how these things work to create patterns in our representations. Then I would watch the film noir documentary on the D2L. I could not put this up on the blend space because it is, we have to have it behind a password protected site. It goes through what the common features of the film noir genre are, because we're going to be talking a little bit about that genre this week. All right, so make sure that you're paying attention to, what are the characters, the sets, the settings, the stylistic tics, if you will, of film noir. How do the stories, what were the themes of the stories? How do the stories unfold? All of these things are unique to the film noir genre. Make sure you're aware of those basic stylistic conventions. And then I also have a piece about TV crime shows. And the reason I have that is because I want you to watch an episode of Moonlighting, which is technically categorizable as a TV crime show. And yet Moonlighting is an odd bird because it's already blurring boundaries between comedy and drama on television. It's an hour long, and it deals with criminal activity. It's a detective show, but it does this in a humorous way, right? So in 1 year, it was actually nominated in both categories, drama and comedy, at the same time as Best Show. Right, so it's one of the first dramedies really blurred those boundaries. In the episode that you're going to watch, it's also blurring boundaries between the TV crime show and film noir. The action in this particular episode is filmed as if it's a noir. Right? So it gives us a chance to think about how these conventions of noir work, how they can be used innovatively to produce a really enjoyable new product. Okay. One of the questions from last week on the D2L was whether genres are just formulaic and empty or whether they can really be creative or facilitate creative processes. And I think that's going to come back up in this week's discussion. Okay. So I also put up on the blend space a couple of a background introduction to the series Moonlighting for people who haven't seen it before. Make sure you look at that. I also put up a trailer for The Postman Always Rings Twice because this is the specific noir film that episode of Moonlighting is referencing. So if you haven't seen the film, you might be a little bit lost. I think the trailer can help clear up a little bit of that confusion, so make sure you watch that. And of course, there are some comprehension questions. The comprehension questions are really fundamental for the quiz. You have a quiz on Sunday, so make sure you look at and can answer those comprehension questions. All right, that's it for today. Enjoy.